You're still having that conversation in your head, not out loud. Not with them, but over and over with yourself. Maybe it was one line, maybe a confession, maybe just a quiet, trembling truth that never made it past your throat. It's the moment you didn't speak, and now it won't leave you alone. You replay it at night, it flares up in the silence between distractions. You revise what you would have said. Imagine how it could have changed things. You tell yourself it's done, it's gone, but something in you knows it isn't. Because you didn't say it, and so your body remembers what your mouth refused. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst who studied the architecture of the human psyche, believed that what we repress doesn't vanish. It retreats. It hides in the shadow. And the longer we refuse to face it, the louder it speaks. Not in words, but in echoes, in sleepless thoughts, in a voice we no longer recognize as our own. That thing you didn't say, maybe you told yourself it wasn't the right time. Maybe you were afraid of what it would reveal. Maybe you thought staying silent was noble or safe. But here's what no one told you. Silence doesn't resolve what words were meant to release. You think silence saved you, but sometimes silence scars. There's a story. Echo, an ancient nymph cursed by the gods to never speak her own words. She could only repeat the voices of others, so when she fell in love with someone who couldn't love her back, she couldn't tell him how she felt. She couldn't scream or cry or confess, and so she faded slowly until nothing remained but her voice. A voice that bounced off walls, empty rooms, and mountains, a voice without a body. You know that feeling, don't you? Of having something to say and no language left to hold it. Of being reduced to reactions and rehearsals and regrets. We become echo, we agree, we nod, we adapt. We become the calm one, the rational one, the quiet one. But inside we are storm and fire and longing. This isn't about weakness, it's about adaptation. And adaptation always comes at a cost. You think you've moved on, but your body hasn't. Your nervous system still braces when someone asks what you're thinking. Your jaw clenches when someone says, "You're so easygoing." You smile, but something in you whispers, "No, you just don't know what I buried." And you didn't bury it because you didn't care. You buried it because you cared too much. Because speaking it meant risking something real, connection, rejection, change, so you stayed quiet. And the voice you silenced? It didn't die, it just learned to wait. You didn't lose your voice, you left it behind at the moment you needed it most. And now it's calling you back, not to punish you, but to remind you it was never about what you didn't say, it's about the part of you that never got to speak. You keep calling it clarity. You say, "I just need up more time to think it through," but you're not thinking anymore. You're spiraling, and the truth is it's been months, maybe years. The words you never spoke have become a maze, one you wander through every night hoping you'll find an exit in the shape of a perfect sentence. But you won't, because the moment already passed, and your mind, despite all its brilliance, can't undo a silence it was never meant to carry alone. Alan Watts, the philosopher who warned us about the traps of overthinking, said it best, "A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts." That's what spirals are, thought chasing thought, emotion dressed as logic, fear pretending to be insight. You believe you're being responsible, but what you're really doing is rehearsing a version of yourself that never existed, the version who knew exactly what to say, when to say it, how to say it, and still be safe. But that version was never real, and now your mind is stuck performing a play that no one is watching. Jung saw this too. He believed that when we deny expression to what's true in us, the psyche doesn't go quiet. It speaks in other ways, dreams, projections, repetition. You don't overthink because you're confused. You overthink because you're afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of hurting someone, afraid of what might collapse if you said the thing you've buried. So instead of risking pain, you invite paralysis. It's like trying to swim across a river by standing still. The more you wait for certainty, the further away the opposite bank feels. There's a paradox at work. The more you think about saying it, the harder it becomes to say. You confuse preparation with healing, but thinking is not healing. Thinking is thinking, and too much of it becomes a cage. You tell yourself you're being cautious, but what if you're just scared? What if the real reason you're silent isn't because you're careful, but because deep down you believe your truth is too heavy to carry out loud? That's the illusion of control. You try to manage every variable before you speak. You try to guarantee a reaction before you offer the truth. But speech is not a contract, it's a release. It's not about what happens next, it's about what happens now. Here's the quiet tragedy. The longer you think without speaking, the more foreign your voice becomes to you. Until one day you forget how it sounded when it wasn't edited. That's not thoughtfulness, that's erosion. So if your mind is still replaying what you never said, maybe it's not asking for more analysis. Maybe it's asking for permission to stop circling, to stop perfecting, to stop pretending that silence is always wise. And to finally admit the words didn't come late, they came right on time. You just didn't feel safe enough to let them live, until now. You didn't just stay quiet, you became someone who learned how to vanish, beautifully. You became composed, controlled. The one who never made things awkward, the one who kept things smooth, the one who nodded even when it hurt, and people admired you for it. They called it strength, they called it grace. But they never saw the part of you behind the smile, the part whispering, "Say something, please, say something." Carl Jung, the Swiss psychoanalyst who mapped the inner terrain of the human soul, called it the shadow. Everything we push out of view to survive, not just rage or jealousy, but honesty, courage, desire, voice. You weren't born silent, you were trained into it by classrooms, families, cultures that taught you which parts of yourself were too much, too loud, too inconvenient. And so you began to edit, then erase it, until one day you couldn't remember if you were being kind or just disappearing. James Hillman, Jung's intellectual descendant, said the soul wants to be seen, witnessed, recognized. But when your words are always folded in, when your truth lives only behind your eyes, you begin to feel like a ghost in your own story. You say you're just reserved. You say, I don't need to say everything. But maybe that's not clarity. Maybe that's camouflage. Here's the moment you don't talk about. You're sitting at dinner. Someone says something that cuts, something you don't agree with, something you want to challenge. And you feel it rise in your chest. The sentence, the opinion, the you that wants out. But it never makes it to your lips. You smile, you nod. And no one notices what didn't happen, but you do. And that's the moment a crack forms. Not in the world, but in you. Jung warned that if we identify too strongly with the persona, the mask we wear to function, we begin to confuse it with the self. We don't just act quiet, we become quiet. We don't just hold back, we forget we ever had anything to say. This is the tragedy. When you don't speak, you don't just lose the conversation, you lose contact with your own aliveness. Because your voice isn't just sound, it's identity. And when you bury it long enough, you start to decay from the inside out. But the shadow doesn't stay buried. It knocks in your restlessness, in your resentment, in your longing to be understood when you haven't made yourself known. You think you're the calm one, but beneath the surface is a storm that's learned how to hold its breath. You think you're safe, but what you've really done is shrink yourself into a version that no longer has space for your truth. You're not silent by nature, you're silent by strategy. And the longer that strategy goes unquestioned, the more your real self becomes a stranger in your own life. You didn't betray others when you stayed quiet. You betrayed the part of yourself that knew this matters, I matter, and I deserve to be heard, if only by me. So ask yourself, who am I when I'm not afraid to speak? And who have I become by not asking that sooner? At first it's subtle. You're tired, but sleep doesn't fix it. You rest, but you don't feel restored. You go silent in a conversation, not because you're thinking, but because there's nothing left to suppress the weight of what's been unsaid. This isn't burnout from doing too much, it's burnout from being too little of who you are. It's the emotional fatigue of never saying the thing, of always biting your tongue. of telling yourself now's not the time until the time is all gone. And that fatigue builds quietly. You think it's fine. You've got this. You've always had this until one day you don't. You're brushing your teeth or sitting in traffic or reaching for your phone and it happens. Something small cracks the surface. A memory, a sentence, a name, and the dam breaks. Not in public, not in flames, but in a quiet, private crumbling, the kind that doesn't make a sound but leaves you sitting on the edge of your own life, wondering, how did I end up so far from myself? This is not weakness. This is what happens when a voice is held back for too long. What begins as self-protection becomes self-erasure. And silence, once your shield, becomes your shackle. You thought you were doing the right thing, being the bigger person, choosing peace, avoiding conflict. But peace without expression isn't peace, it's performance. There's a paradox we rarely speak aloud. The more you stay silent to avoid pain, the more pain you carry alone. The more you swallow to protect others, the more your own soul begins to starve. You tried to stay small to be safe, but all that did was leave you invisible, even to yourself. You're not here to be invisible. Jung once said, what you do not bring to consciousness appears in your life as fate. So the words you didn't say, the boundaries you didn't hold, the truth you buried to keep the peace, they don't disappear. They return as distance, as disconnection, as the ache that nothing ever feels quite real, because you haven't been real in so long. But this breaking isn't the end, it's the invitation. To stop performing and start revealing. To let your voice rise, not to be loud, but to be honest. You don't need to scream, you just need to stop whispering your life away. Let the dam break, let the truth spill. Not to change the past, but to finally stop carrying the weight of it alone. The voice you buried is not here to hurt you. It's here to return you to yourself. You didn't lose your voice, you traded it quietly, gradually, for belonging. Not to deceive, not to manipulate, but to survive. To stay connected, to be safe. You learned that speaking could cost you love. That honesty might shatter the room. So you adapted, you learned to read faces before you finished your sentence. You trimmed your words to fit into silences that didn't welcome truth. And with every withheld truth, you taught yourself it's better to be agreeable than authentic. Better to be silent than rejected. Better to be tolerated than too much. Carl Jung called this process identification with the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world. But when worn too long, the mask doesn't just cover the face, it fuses to it. And soon you forget who you were before the silence. But that version of you, the unedited one, didn't vanish. It waits, it watches, and sometimes it whispers. You hear it when you walk away from a conversation and feel hollow. When you smile but your stomach knots. When you agree but something in your chest says that's not the truth. Jung didn't just expose the shadow, he offered a way to dialogue with it. He called it active imagination, a practice of sitting with the symbols, images, voices inside you that never got to speak. It's not analysis, it's not journaling. It's listening with reverence to the parts of you you've abandoned. The anxious child who was punished for speaking too boldly. The teenager who stopped expressing because it was safer to blend in. The adult who gave up arguing because the cost of honesty was always too high. They're still in there, not broken, not weak, just buried beneath years of performance. You don't have to perform anymore. There's a moment in Borges' Library of Babel, an endless library that contains every possible book most filled with nonsense. The seekers go mad trying to find one meaningful text in the chaos. That's what the overthinking becomes. You keep sifting through internal noise, searching for the perfect way to say it, the perfect time, the perfect response that will keep you safe and understood. But what you're really searching for is permission. Permission to speak without performing, to be seen without curating, to exist without shrinking. You don't reclaim your voice by yelling. You reclaim it by refusing to abandon it one more time, so start small. Write a line you were never brave enough to say. Tell the truth in a way no one has to hear except you. Let the voice come back imperfect, trembling, raw. Let it stumble, let it rise, let it remember itself. Because this isn't about volume, it's about alignment. It's about no longer mistaking peace for silence or strength for suppression. You don't need the perfect words. You just need one real one. Say it to yourself, to the page, to the mirror, to the past version of you that learned silence too well. Because now, finally, you're not just remembering what you didn't say. You're becoming the person who can say it, and that changes everything. You think it's about the words, the ones you never said. But it's not. It's about the version of you who didn't get to exist because those words stayed locked inside. The you who dimmed, who deferred, who kept the peace at the cost of your presence. The you who waited for a moment that never came. The you who now replays that silence like a looped prayer with no altar. But here's the truth. Not everything needs to be said to be healed, but everything must be seen. There's a scene. You're sitting on your bed. It's late. You've written the message 3 times, the one you never sent. You read it over, and instead of hitting send, you delete it. That's the moment you realize what you were searching for wasn't a response. It was relief. And relief doesn't always come from expression. Sometimes it comes from release. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes becoming who you are means forgiving who you were. You stayed silent for a reason. Not because you were weak, but because you were protecting yourself. Because you didn't have the tools. Because the room wasn't safe. Because the risk felt like more than you could bear. And that deserves compassion, not shame. You think if you had said the thing, it all would have changed. And maybe it would have. But that doesn't make you a coward. It makes you human. Regret isn't proof of failure, it's proof of awareness. Proof that something in you was alive, even in silence. That a part of you wanted more, and that part still does. But now you don't have to carry it like a wound. You can carry it like a lesson. Not as punishment, but as permission. Permission to be different now. To say the thing when it matters. To stop editing your soul into something palatable. To let your voice be awkward, imperfect, too much, and still true. There's a paradox here, the final one. What you don't say can haunt you. But sometimes saying it isn't what heals you. It's knowing that that you're allowed to. That your silence is no longer a sentence, but a choice. So make a new one. You don't have to post it. You don't have to send it. But maybe, just maybe, you can leave it here in the comments. The sentence you never said. The moment you've been replaying. The part of you that stayed quiet when it wanted to scream. Write it not for them, for you. Because when you name what you buried, you begin to unearth yourself. And maybe that's the only closure you ever needed, not to be heard. But to finally listen to the voice inside you whispering, we're safe now, you can speak. And if this video became that moment for you, if it opened something you've kept locked away, leave it behind, in a sentence, in a breath. In a word you never thought you'd say out loud. You didn't lose your voice, you buried it. And now you've brought it home.